Hello and welcome to another episode of Theology Thursdays. Now last time we began looking at the virtues, what a virtue is, and then started to unpack the four cardinal virtues. And we looked at wisdom, or prudence, and the queen of the virtues, the moral knowledge of right and wrong. And then we looked at justice as that virtue by which we order our lives really in terms of what we owe to the other and the hierarchy of those in terms of God, our parents, society, the other, our neighbour, and so on and so forth. Today I'm going to look at the last two of the cardinal virtues. So first we're going to look at temperance or self-control, and then fortitude. And then towards the end of today's episode I'll introduce the theological virtues. So, temperance or self-control. Now as human beings we straddle the spiritual and the material, our physical body and our immaterial souls. So like the animals, we share their nature. We are animals, but we are very distinct from the animals in the sense that we are rational beings. We are rational animals. Now as animals we need to eat and drink to survive. And so our bodies are ordered towards that and crave in order to survive food and drink. And as a species we also need to reproduce, and our sexuality is ordered to that as well. As animals we're ordered to that, to reproduce the species. So our bodies are hardwired in terms of pleasure for food and drink and sex. And so this makes living a virtuous life as a human being, as a rational animal, it's really important that those desires are tempered, that we are in control of them. And that's what temperance does. It tempers those desires. Or in perhaps more common language, we have self-control. And it's crucial we learn this virtue from an early age. And those of us involved in education, if you teach in a school or whatever education of young people, you really see this. If a child has not learnt temperance, hasn't learnt to control themselves, it's a massive handicap for them in terms of learning and living life. And if we reach adulthood, God forbid, without learning any self-control, then it's really impossible to live a human life in any ordered way if we don't have this virtue. So it's a crucial one to learn and then to practice as we grow older. Again, I don't want to sound like the moral life is perfectible. There's always areas for us where we lack self-control. There's probably some weakness we have, and so it's an ongoing effort to learn this virtue, across all the areas of our life. The fourth of the cardinal virtues, these natural virtues that we can learn and then live, is fortitude or courage. And this virtue is not so much about physical courage. Often we associate courage with physical acts of bravery, whether it be on a football field or even doing a public speech or jumping off out of a plane, doing some skydiving. That all involves some courage. But this virtue of courage is more than just that. It's moral courage. So what do we mean by moral courage? Well, moral courage is that virtue by which, when it's difficult to do the right thing, or when it's difficult to not do the wrong thing, then moral courage is that virtue that kicks in and helps us either to do what's right or not do what's wrong. And if anyone examines their life, you can see all those times where we fail. And that failure might be in the area of justice. It might be in the area of moral wisdom or lack of temperance. All those things. It may be that. But at heart also it's a failure of moral courage. And usually moral courage, the biggest enemy to us living the moral life, is ourselves. So when you don't really feel like doing something you ought, you don't really feel like it emotionally, physically, you don't really feel like it. There's no outside pressure, but you just don't feel like it. Well, moral courage is that virtue that says, actually, I will get up today and do that task. Or I will go out of my way, out of my comfort zone to do what is right. So the first thing that moral courage combats against is ourselves. But obviously there's also external pressure to us in terms of doing the right thing, whether it be peer pressure. That can be a massive thing, both from sort of those people close to us, but also that external cultural pressure. As Christians, we certainly experience that a lot. That sort of perceived sometimes real, but sometimes perceived pressure of society just to do away with something that may run counter to the culture in terms of our Christian beliefs, our Christian morals. So moral virtue really helps us to live the moral life because it can help us withstand those temptations to, of our own feelings, but also those external pressures. So those 4 cardinal virtues there, as I said, we learn them and we need to live them until they inhere in our soul, that they become part of who we are, and therefore we can really be free, integrated and free. And as I think more or less mentioned, speaking about courage, this is the work of a lifetime. But it's crucial in childhood that they're at least taught, that young people can actually realize what the moral life is, and through discipline and repeated action really come to know the virtues. So I'm now going to turn to another type of virtue, and obviously also very crucial, but these are more explicitly Christian. The cardinal virtues, the Greeks spoke about them. They didn't know anything about Christ, pre-Christ. Theological virtues are a specifically Christian teaching based on the Christian belief that we receive supernaturally these virtues at our baptism. And there are 3 of them: faith, hope, and love. So unlike the moral virtues, which are taught to us, they're received in a certain way, absolutely, but then we naturally try to learn them and to grow in them and to practice them. The theological virtues are a grace received. God gives us this grace at our baptism. So these powers are given to us in our baptism. So they differ from the human virtues in that sense, but they're also like the human virtues. Why? Because although the power is just received by grace, they also require practice. They also require our cooperation. They, in a sense, are like moral muscles that need working out. Because if we don't do that, then they'll become weak and we won't be able to live faith, hope, and love as God intends or God desires for us. So the other point to say before speaking about these 3 virtues more explicitly is that the human virtues or the moral virtues of prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude and faith, hope and love, we need them all working together to live the full Christian life. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next time we'll look at the 3 theological virtues: faith, hope and love. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.